Welcome to the Roy Morgan Update, the latest Roy Morgan survey on voting intention, conducted after the US bombing of the Iranian nuclear sites, shows the ALP maintaining a commanding lead on 57.5%, ahead of the coalition on only 42.5% on a two-party preferred basis. That's virtually unchanged from the first 3 weeks of June. The Labor primary vote was down slightly by 1% to 36.5%, still well ahead of the coalition on 30.5%, down 0.5%. Support for the Greens was unchanged on 12%, support for One Nation increased 2% to 8.5%, while support for independents and other parties was down 1% to 12.5%. However, Roy Morgan government confidence dropped 9 points this week to 92.5%. Once again, more Australians say the country is going in the wrong direction, 46%, than the right direction, 38.5%. And consumer confidence edged up again this week. The latest ANZ Roy Morgan consumer confidence, based on interviews conducted throughout last week, increased 0.5 points to 87.2, a second straight weekly increase. The small increase was driven by another increase in net buying intentions as the end-of-year sales continued. That was up 4 percentage points. Now, although it's still low, net buying intentions are now at their highest for well over 3 years, since March 2022. There was also another factor that drove the increase in consumer confidence. That's the increased confidence of people paying off their home, those with a mortgage. This group's confidence increased 5.5 points to 90.1 and is now clearly higher than both people who own their own home outright and renters. This increase is likely related to the widespread expectations that the Reserve Bank is set to deliver another interest rate cut next week, perhaps even as large as 50 basis points. There was also relatively good news on the inflation front this week, before next week's Reserve Bank meeting, with inflation expectations unchanged at 4.7%. So Australians are now expecting inflation of 4.7% over each of the next 2 years. That's a figure just below the long-term average of 4.8%. That's the long-term average for this measure over the last 15 years. And now, a look across the Tasman to the political situation in New Zealand. In June, the Roy Morgan poll shows the main governing party, National, on 32%, ahead of the opposition Labor Party on 28.5%. Both virtually unchanged on a month ago. Mirroring the situation in Australia, both major parties are struggling to attract widespread support, and this is the 9th straight month that both parties have less than a third of total support. There was some movement in support for National's governing partner, NZ First, which increased 1.5% to 8%, while ACT was virtually unchanged at 11.5%. The increase in support for NZ First drove a better result for the National-led government, which was up 1.5% to 51.5. And this is the first time this year that a majority of New Zealanders have supported the government. While 44.5% support the parliamentary opposition, including 28.5% for Labor, 11% for the Greens and 5% for the Maori Party. This is the lowest level of support for the Greens since the New Zealand election in late 2023. And finally today, a look at smoking and vaping rates of Australians, and especially younger Australians. Roy Morgan has measured Australians' smoking incidence or smoking behaviour for decades. Factory-made cigarettes, roll your own, more recently vaping. And the latest results show 28% of young Australians, that's Australians aged 18 to 24, smoke or vape. In July last year, new legislation was introduced by the Albanese government prohibiting the importation, domestic manufacture, supply, commercial possession and advertisement of disposable single-use and non-therapeutic vapes in Australia. Essentially, vapes were banned. Unfortunately, the incidence of 18 to 24-year-olds smoking or vaping has increased to 28%, an estimated 700,000 people. And that's an increase of 2.9 percentage points, or 80,000 young people, since September 2024, when smoking incidence was at a low point. This is the highest rate of smoking or vaping among any age group. And the increase is driven by increased rates of vaping, that's up 1.5 points, smoking factory-made cigarettes, FMCs, up 2.9%, and roll your own, up 0.5%. And that's a wrap. Thanks for your interest in Roy Morgan's latest results. For more detail on the topics covered in this video, head to the Roy Morgan website. And I'll be back next week to bring you the latest results for consumer confidence, inflation expectations, and business confidence. Thanks for listening.